All right, guys, welcome back to the Establish the Pass podcast presented by ClutchPoints. I'm your host, Blake Lovell. With me, as always, my co-host, Dillon Reagan, back here to discuss the action from the divisional round in the NFL playoffs. And you know, Dillon, got a little too confident after my regular season victory for the picks because, I was trying to make things interesting. I was like, all right, got a little momentum here, but the playoffs have been ruled by you thus far. So look, I was hoping that things could be a little more interesting than they seemed with maybe just the expected picks, I guess, -1, but not happening. Quite a weekend once again in the NFL, but let's just jump right into it, and we'll kind of discuss my lackluster picks as we go along here. But the Chiefs take care of business against the Jags, 27-20. As we said, I thought that was a game that, I don't think we probably would have been shocked that it played out this way, knowing what we know about Patrick Mahomes and the injury and such. Certainly was a little bit tougher for the Chiefs, given everything involved in that, and that will undoubtedly be the biggest storyline heading into the AFC Championship game. But still, the Chiefs find a way to win, and Mahomes comes back into the game, and fifth straight AFC title game now for Andy Reid's bunch. And this was, again, it's hard to kind of look at this game overall because the thing in your head is still about Mahomes and looking forward, but the Chiefs find a way to win this one, and that's all that matters this time of year.
Yep, exactly. Yes, I got the picks right here, but I did not quite hit this betting lock. It looked all right until right at the end where the Jags, of course, kicked the field goal. It made sense to have a chance to do an onside kick, get the ball back for a Hail Mary or two at the end. So just slightly missed that. Kind of went along the lines, though, overall, how we felt it might. Like you said, even without the Mahomes, obviously the Mahomes injury throws a wrench in there. But regardless, they drove down the field fine with Chad Henne, who I was joking with some, I was messaging my dad. I was like, do you remember that we saw this man play in the Rose Bowl when I was 13 years old against Texas when Michigan played them? It's just hilarious. But he had a great drive there. They look completely composed, and just as a sign of for all the things that are said about the Shanahan offense and all the quarterbacks that can fit in well in San Francisco, you're combining in Kansas City. This is what happens when you have a superstar quarterback, perhaps probably the best quarterback in the league, with someone like Andy Reid and an offense built like this. And obviously they don't have the playmakers of the Niners, but still some guys that can make a lot of things happen. And it was fun to watch. I mean, before Mahomes got hurt, that first touchdown drive was a clinic. It was one of the better drives, I feel like, from top to bottom, start to finish, that we'd seen, which is saying something because he's had some fantastic ones, obviously. A lot of quicker drives at times with one play here and there for big spots. But a big takeaway overall with the Jags, they were right in it. Obviously had a chance without the fumble by Agnew down inside the 10. They're about to cut that to a 3-point game late. They're right there. I don't think they're too far apart. They have a couple little misfires. The one drop by Christian Kirk on that deep ball that I know people have criticized Collinsworth for saying was overthrown, when in fact it went right through Kirk's hands. It was pretty perfect in my mind. But overall, I think they're just a couple pieces away. They can't defend tight ends. We knew that going in. Obviously, it was going to be a big problem with Travis Kelce, just as it was with Gerald Everett. They've spent a lot of capital, both in the draft and free agency, with linebackers to try to address that. So that's something they can work on. But I think overall, you see the progression of Trevor Lawrence. I don't think this team was really phased by the moment. It's just they're playing a Goliath, and the Chiefs, like you mentioned, 5 straight AFC title games all at home too, now that the Bills fell yesterday. So pretty much went along the kind of course of the game that we thought it might, and we thought it would be right around that 8.5 number that ended up being, with them winning by 7. So this one, out of all the games, maybe played out the most close to what we had kind of expected going in.
Yeah, like I said, probably the biggest talking point is something we'll actually be discussing in the next episode, because it's like, from this one, not a lot to take away, I guess, outside of just knowing what the setup could be in the AFC Championship game.
Yep.
With or without Patrick Mahomes on the field. So, yeah, we'll talk more about that in the next episode. But all right, Dillon, that was your lock. It didn't work out great, but you had an excuse. All right. Me, on the other hand, didn't really have an excuse in this one, because the Eagles took care of business against the Giants, 38-7. I said, Dillon, I'm just feeling something about this one. I'm going to make, for the first time ever, I'm going to go the opposite lock. Meaning, usually we pick the favorite as our lock. That's kind of been our rule. We said, I said, no, I feel so good about this one. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to take the Giants plus 7.5. They're going to keep this within a touchdown. This game was over from the very start. It was all Eagles. And you know what? I'll say this, like, joking aside about the picks and such, this is exactly what you want to see from the Eagles. Like, this is, if you wanted to obviously look at the regular season, know that they're one of the best teams in the NFL, if not the best team in the NFL. If you wanted just to feel really good about saying, well, this isn't, kind of one of those seasons, team goes in the playoffs, they're not clicking on all cylinders, complete opposite here. They were great, and now it gives you a lot of confidence for the Eagles moving into this big NFC Championship game. But what else do you say? They look fantastic. Made everything hard on the Giants, and walk away victorious here.
Yeah, it was domination from the start. As soon as the Giants couldn't kind of get those drives going like they did after the Vikings scored quickly in the first playoff game, you knew it was going to probably be a rough day for them because they just didn't have any answers. We didn't think they might to Philadelphia on the ground. We noted how the Giants were worst defense in DVOA against the run in the regular season. And overall, that the Vikings-Giants matchup, they were easily the two lowest DVOA teams in the entire NFL that made the playoffs, not let alone, and they're facing each other. The Giants, again, I said this kind of, I think, on the preview, but this season's still a success where you're at with Brian Daboll. You still looked at this as making the most of the players and what you had this year. This game was just a message, though, and something that they should have known going into the game regardless, but that they just aren't on the depth level of the Eagles at this point. The rosters are just in very different places. Philadelphia has, they noted it a number of times in the broadcast, not just the players they've drafted and developed, but some of the trades they've made for C.J. Gardner-Watt and some of the other players that they've brought in, like James Bradbury, cut by the Giants. Just overall, the structure that they have, even when they have some minor injuries here and there, you see how sound they are, all the compliments they have on the running game, and all those guys just had dominant days. I mean, you don't expect maybe 268 rushing yards, but I'm not surprised they were going to be able to push closer to 200, honestly, because it just felt like, and even without Hurts being, the Hurts that we know, it looked like he had the capability to make some of those runs, but he was cautious enough. Kind of, they understood what was going on here. They're pretty clearly going to come out on top, and I don't think Jalen and smartly did not make some of the runs that we might see him have to do against San Francisco, where he puts his body in the line. I think they did a good job of limiting those chances. You still see, maybe not A.J. Brown's best game. It doesn't matter. They didn't need the pass against this Giants team to win. I think that hopefully he's fine. And he came up gimpy after a couple plays there, and I believe the third quarter or early fourth quarter. Obviously a big and really important piece that's going to be much more crucial to the next matchup against a very different defense than they face. So yeah, like you said, what you wanted to see from the Eagles, I think from top to bottom, defensively, to shut down a team that knew was going to try to run the ball, not to let Daniel Jones have any room to breathe. Obviously, it's going to be a different animal again with San Francisco, but this was a sign that the Eagles that we knew all season that were so dominant for most of the year, they're still here, and they're not going to be an easy out, obviously, even with the strength of the opponent they're going to have coming up here.
Well, Sunday was the day of games, as we said. We were probably most looking forward to because, you kind of looked at how the first two played out, and obviously Eagles-Giants much more one-sided than we expected. But, I mean, the first game did not probably go as expected in terms of how close it was because we thought this would be, game of the year type standards, Dylan, but it did not hit that level, as we know. Bengals 27, Bills 10, and honestly, this is another game that I thought right from the start, you kind of thought, all right, well, the Bills will make this interesting, and they did, going to half, I think it was, 14-10. But this was another one where, like, just the way the game started and just how everything was going early on, I never really got the sense that the Bills were going to win this game. Like, it felt like the Bengals came out early. They did exactly what they needed to do. They avoided, what do we always say in these kind of games? Like, you can't afford to get down early on the road in these sort of kind of games. And they avoided that. They came out up 2 touchdowns after a quarter. And then, you never sort of got the sense that the Bills were going to make this huge comeback. And didn't happen. Bengals win again, which that's just what they do these days. A disappointing performance for the Bills, not just a disappointing loss. I think certainly a disappointing performance. Yeah. But for the Bengals, I mean, I don't, it's interesting because you look at all these teams right now, talk about the confidence level of all these teams that have made it to this point. It's wild to think that maybe the least confident team of the ones that are left standing might be the Chiefs. And it's because, they don't know their quarterback situation, but
Yeah.
the Bengals are as confident as can be. The Eagles are as confident as can be. We'll get to the Niners in a second. I mean, what a performance in a playoff setting in the snow on the road, and the Bengals just came out and just took care of business.
Yeah, this is the most complete game that they've probably had that I can remember. Like they've beaten some great teams, but to convincingly dominate a Super Bowl favorite throughout most of the year on their home field, and like you
Yeah.
said, making it look. And they said this during, I think Tony Romo and Jim Nantz, they made a good point, and it's something you noticed just watching as well. It was so difficult for the two scoring drives the Bills have. And that in itself is crazy. Two scoring drives for the Bills. But both of them were like 14 plus plays. I think the touchdown drive was 15, the field goal was 14. And meanwhile, that first drive for Cincinnati, 6 plays. Another touchdown later, 10 plays. They had some longer drives in the second half. They were running the ball really well, efficiently. Buffalo, even when they knew that they were going to be running, they couldn't stop it. But it was just the ease with what it seemed like Cincinnati was just taking what the Bills were giving them. They couldn't get a pass rush going. It looked like I know that there's in the past, Tom Brady's had quotes about he loved playing in the snow because it really slows down the rush. And we knew that the Bills already, without Von Miller, that was going to be a question mark. But I thought the Bengals offensive linemen, you can only play on the surface you're given. I thought they stepped up with some of the backups that are in there. Jackson Carman, I know Burrow had made a point to point out that he didn't feel any pressure from his side the whole game. Obviously, going to be different moving forward, but yeah, like you said, the confidence level of this team. I mean, everyone after the game making all the following Burrow's lead by making the jokes about getting the refunds for the AFC title game in Atlanta. I mean, they just play as complete again of a performance as you could hope for. A lot of the signs of the same kind of approach that they took getting pressure in the AFC title game last year against Kansas City, getting pressure with 3 or 4 guys, or even if they're not getting pressure, still dropping back 7-8, flooding all those passing lanes that Josh Allen likes to look at, and we know that Mahomes does as well. It's going to be, I think, we've talked about Lou Amarillo and the attention that he deserves potentially as a coaching candidate. I know some other people have kind of been saying this, but I mean his ability to adjust to the opponent and what they've as complete of a team as they have right now with injuries at corner. It didn't look like it the way that some of these guys were playing. They're just such a sound team. Like just they don't really the offensive line is still a concern if say they play the Niners in the Super Bowl. Obviously against anyone's offensive line is a concern against them, but especially them. But outside of that, I mean, they're as complete of a team that doesn't have that many holes on their roster. Like you said, it's funny to think about with the Chiefs, but we know even though their defense has played better, it's not perfect. There's little things. The run defense for the Eagles has been an issue at times. I mean, maybe you could argue San Francisco is pretty complete right now, but you don't have Joe Burrow. As much as we're about to compliment Purdy in a second here, I mean, Joe Burrow, just an absolute killer. Like, just has stone cold, composed, I mean, it looked like it could have been 21-0. There's a couple little misfires here and there on that punt that they had before the field goal that put them back up 17-7. It's just an interesting game to look back on. Like you said, disappointing from Buffalo's point of view. I don't think the play calling was great either at times, especially on offense, but defense, they didn't really adjust to Cincinnati just running right at them with, only keeping 6 in the box often. And yeah, it's now, I think the Bengals made a statement here that they're not just it's not the Bills, it's not the Mahomes and Allen story with the Bengals. Is that team that's like the next one right there, chomping at the bit. I mean, this is back-to-back AFC title game appearances, possibly back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, and as we have talked about since the end of the regular season, I think they're a better team than they were a year ago.
Yeah, it's scary to think because, I mean, again, their confidence last year at this point was they were a confident team, right? I mean, after they went and won, beat the Titans on the road, and those kind of games. But I mean, their confidence level right now is even better, I think, than it was this time last year. And so, knowing that they can get to that point, and knowing now they're 1 win away from doing that, and certainly in a familiar situation against the Chiefs. So, yeah, I mean, they are doing everything right at this point, and certainly to win like that, very impressive to do that against the Bills, who, as we said, favorite probably coming into the season, the playoffs, and Bengals though advancing once again to the AFC title game. So, all right, that left us with one game, and that was I think probably maybe the most interesting game of the bunch.
Yeah.
Maybe not been the most exciting from a scoring standpoint, but I think it was definitely the most interesting. The Niners beat the Cowboys 19-12 here. Again, you want to talk about my picks? This was my upset pick. I told you I should have went with the Bengals. I don't know why I didn't, but
I went with the Bengals. I wasn't so sure about
you
it though.
did.
So
Well, I look if you're gonna bank on one or the other, I probably should have went with the Bengals. I felt like it was a better choice, but that's all right. I went with the Cowboys. Didn't happen though. Niners get the win, and as we said, talk about a team that has a lot of confidence. Well, the Niners still have not lost since that game against the Chiefs, which was what was the date we said?
something. Yeah.
October 23rd. So yeah, a long time ago. It is January 23rd. Keep that in mind, folks. October 23rd, last time the Niners lost a game. So yeah. So I mean, I think this game played out probably as we would have expected because we said the two defenses are going to be able to dictate some things in this one, and it just happened to be the Niners took advantage, on their basically last drive that was a last drive to win the game type scenario, right? Where you're kind of in that point where, hey, we really need a touchdown here. And they're able to get that touchdown on that drive. Cowboys, meanwhile, I feel like the Cowboys is sort of a similar story, Dylan, in that you feel like when they get in those points, they're just like pivotal moments in a game where they have to make a play. It just felt like they did not do it. And of course, I think the couple interceptions Dak threw, certainly, I'm thinking of the first one, I guess. I can't remember the exact setting on the other one, but I know the first one was that the one with Gallup, and I don't know if that was a Gallup thing or just a bad throw, but it was.
Oh yeah, when he didn't come back to the ball was Gallup. The
Yeah,
second one
yeah,
was in the red zone. Second one was
that's
real
right.
bad.
That's the one I was like, I knew it was okay. That was the red zone one, and so yeah, I mean, look, right? It's just that's not what you want from the Cowboys. We said going in, you almost have to be flawless, I think, to win a game like this. Like you needed Dak's best game. You needed somehow to find something in the rushing attack. They could not do any of that. Now, of course, Tony Pollard's injury probably affects that a little bit. But Zeke 10 carries for 26 yards, 2.6 yards a carry. CeeDee Lamb had a big game, but everyone else really not a lot there. But you know what? The Niners didn't have to be perfect either because we just, look, offensively, you knew there was going to be a challenge against this Cowboys defense. But again, they find a way to make the plays. And something I thought was big for both sides here, we talk about both teams having that big playability. Cowboys pretty much prevented that right outside of that one big long play from George Kittle, I think. Lamb had the big one, I think almost went for 50 yards. But outside of that, I mean, big plays were not really a theme in this game, which should not be that surprising. I will say this, Dylan, before I forget quickly. The Cowboys had that, I don't remember if it was the kickoff return or the punt return, where
It's a kickoff if it's the one
Turpin?
Turpin had.
So as I'm watching this, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, if he just goes right, like if he just takes one step to the right, I'm like, I think he scores a touchdown. But runs into kind of the pile there. It was just whatever, two guys. His own guy was there, and of course a Niners player was there. But I replayed that, and I'm like, oh my goodness, if he would have taken one step to the right, I think he would have scored a touchdown. And you think about how much that changes the game too. So this was a fun game. Like I said, I know 19-12 doesn't sound that exciting, but I thought this was maybe the most exciting game of the weekend just because I thought it played out as we expected, and there were a lot of kind of big moments in that game. But ultimately, it's the Niners who get the win.
Yeah, it was the most captivating game. It was the most intensity I felt watching. Kind of we expected that maybe a little more with the Bengals and Bills game than we got. The other two kind of went, in ways that even if we thought the Giants might stick around, kind of went the way we thought. This one, this was, both defenses put on absolute top performances. The Niners defense, but I think the Dallas defense, obviously in the second half, started to wear down a bit. Those last two, the touchdown drive to take the lead and then the field goal to push it back to a full 7 points. Those two drives combined took up 13 minutes and 59 seconds. In between those was the return that you're talking about from Turpin. They ended up getting a field goal on that drive. I wonder if what their defense is like coming out after that touchdown drive, if they have to go right back out. It was just starting to become a point where the Niners were figuring out just enough, finding that little bit of an edge. Not the same, but similar to like I thought it felt like, yeah, it's just because I'm a Rams fan probably, the Super Bowl between the Rams and Patriots where both defenses dominated, but the Patriots just started finding a few more tools, started wearing them down, just found enough to get down the field, and ultimately, obviously, getting that touchdown. I think Purdy played as well as you could have hoped. I thought he had some really great throws on third down, some good decisions. Obviously, still had things opened up, but this was, I mean, yeah, all the things that people said about the Cowboys defense going in, about the difference in speed compared to some of the space that the Niners have been able to create for windows for Purdy to throw in. It was true. I mean, they made it real tough all day, and to Brock's credit, didn't turn the ball over. The only turnover is the fumble on the punt. Both defenses, when put, another part about how the defenses are so great in this game. Both times that you had the first Dak interception and then the fumble by the Niners, defenses are pushed back. Both times they held them to field goal attempts. I mean, just really impressive to see what those defenses did in those spots. And Dallas's defense probably deserved better. But yeah, I think the storyline, unfortunately, it's not. It's just the talking heads saying that Dak didn't have the best game. I mean, it was ultimately the difference in this one. I think between him, some of the decisions he made in spots, and obviously Maher missing the extra point, and as I noted, probably was going to be missed even if it gets blocked. I mean, maybe that does impact the decision making on that second interception where Dak's like, we have to score in that moment. I don't know. Yeah. Right, he forces it in there, but those are both so crucial. I mean, the first one, like I mentioned, they only hold them to 3 points after, but the other one right before the half, I mean, Dallas they also were kind of hurrying up after they got one of those first downs. It was like they could have really made sure that it was either they get a field goal attempt and Niners get nothing, or they score a touchdown and there's little time. So I don't know why they were rushing. It basically was a 6-point swing if the Dallas at least gets a short field goal. We saw Maher make some field goals after, and shorter ones, and the one short one in particular. So that's a 6-point swing right there. And the missed extra point, it's a 7-point game. And it really was that close for a lot of it. Fred Warner's an animal. I know a lot was made of that play up the seam where Dak looked like he might have CD, but I don't think that was a bad play by Dak. That was probably one of the, he made misfired on a few, but that one wasn't a tough one. That was just Fred Warner being an absolute beast and probably the best coverage linebackers we've talked about in the entire NFL. They're just a complete team, and like you said, you can't have those mistakes against the Niners. You have to maybe not be perfect, but the defense gives them more than enough chances to not be perfect on offense. But the turnovers were just all of them are so big. I think really that's where the game kind of flipped, and ultimately, Dak not. We've been pretty complimentary of Dak, but we don't quite put him obviously on that level with some of these other elite guys. And you saw some of the limitations here when they face really tough defenses. It's tough. I do think the game may go differently if Tony Pollard stays healthy. He was the one guy in the running game that was getting something going, or even when they were throwing him the ball. I mean, I think he was an X factor too. He was the first guy I'd seen in weeks that actually fell forward when he got hit by a Niner defender, not backward. I think, maybe they need that extra weapon. I mean, CD was great, but again, receiving wise, as we've talked about after, the depth there isn't quite where you'd hope. So it's those slight margins of error, and that's all that it takes in this time of year. And the Niners are just such a complete team that, as a Rams fan, would have preferred maybe if they don't move on, but I also respect what they're able to do, and they're just a really fun defense to watch. It's such an aggressive group. I love the style that they play with, and I thought they had one of their probably best performances as a defense in a big spot here in this game.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sets up now, right? And I mean, we got two big games. I mean, which you expect, NFC, AFC championship game. But again, you talk about the confidence level of these teams. Yep. What a setup now. Again, Mahomes' injury is the most important talking point, I think. But Chiefs, Bengals, Eagles, Niners, almost seems like it was always kind of maybe set this way, just trying to figure out where to put the Bills in that discussion. But Bengals win, Bills are out. Now we have it kind of set here for the AFC and NFC title game. So a fun weekend of action, Dylan. But, of course, two big games to go before we know who will be playing in the Super Bowl. But for now, a lot of stuff over at ClutchPoints covering all the action from the weekend as well as looking ahead. Of course, potential impact of Mahomes and looking at these games in depth so everybody know where they can find all that.
Yeah, you can go to the ClutchPoints app to the NFL section to follow both the NFC and AFC title games, all of our NFL coverage overall. Yeah, tons of fallout right now. We'll get later in the week to some of the predictions for the AFC and NFC title games, betting predictions, all sorts of stuff. But right now, a lot of a lot of interesting things that happened after those games from Stephon Diggs just kind of bouncing from the Bills locker room to some of the comments from some of these players, and interesting stuff for sure. But we'll be obviously the Mahomes injury is probably the biggest storyline we'll be following all week. We'll have articles, I'm sure, daily on the NFL section if you go to the Chiefs page. If you just update that every day, you'll probably see anything that's happening there. So we'll keep you updated. And should be two really fun. I know we got time to talk about them next time, but two really, really exciting matchups. I mean, these are four just spectacular teams. I don't think there's anyone that you're like, wow, how'd they get there? They're all great teams at this point.
Yep. Be sure to check it all out at Clutch Points. Lots of fun stuff on the way to get ready for these two AFC, NFC championship games. So check it all out there. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Any podcast app you use, search for Establish the Pass. And thanks as always for listening to the podcast. And we'll talk to you next time here on the Establish the Pass podcast.